Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Dirks, and on behalf of ACRL and Choice, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, What Do Students and Faculty Need in a Research Database? The Librarian's Perspective. This webinar is sponsored by ProQuest. Today's discussion is one in a series of sponsored webinars from ACRL and Choice that addresses new ideas, developments, and products of interest to the academic library community. Free to users, these structured 60-minute live presentations provide the opportunity for interactive discussions of important new issues and developments in academic librarianship by librarians, vendors, authors, and other interested stakeholders. Before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. In the main area of the screen, you should be able to follow along with the presentation materials. Along the right-hand side, you should see a Q&A panel and a chat panel. If you don't, you can click the little button that looks like a dialog cloud, sort of in the bottom of the middle of your screen, sort of towards the middle, and that should open up the chat panel for you. You can use that to message me directly with any technical problems that you may be having, and I will troubleshoot those with you privately. The Q&A panel should also be available to you, and that is a great place to drop your questions for our speakers today. If you have them, we will hold those there in a queue until the end of the program, where we will have a dedicated couple of minutes for those questions. I would also note that today we are using the hashtag ACRL Choice Webinars, and if you get another screen handy, feel free to shout out to us. We're at choice_reviews on Twitter, and you can see our Facebook handle there as well. Also note that we are recording today's program and that everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archived version. And our speaker today is Brie Betz, the Global Director of Product Innovation and Digital Strategy at ProQuest. And I believe here to say a quick word or two is Katie Devlin as well from ProQuest.
Thank you, Mark. So we would just really want to welcome everybody here. This webinar, as Brie will tell you, is based on some research that we did with a third party. I'll leave that to Brie to talk about, but we're really excited to present this information to you. And so without further ado, here is Brie Betz, and she will take it away from here.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Mark. Very happy to have all of you on the call today. Very excited to talk to you about some of the research that ProQuest has been doing and share some insights about what that means for library management and for working with library users. So just a brief introduction about myself. As was mentioned, I am a product director at ProQuest. I lead the product and marketing strategy within ProQuest Information Solutions Unit. I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois. I went to school in California, worked in New York for a long time, then moved to the Netherlands, then to London, and I'm now based in Cambridge in the UK. And in the background of this slide, you'll see the bridge that I cross on the way to work every day. It's a very lovely bridge across the Cam, so a lovely place to live. It's a beautiful day here, beautiful evening. I'm responsible for really enabling customer discovery and developing digital products that support and delight students, faculty, and librarians. And a lot of these insights are based on this type of research, so very excited to share that with you today. And so just as a refresher for why you said you wanted to attend this session, we promised to talk to you about the importance of having a variety of content available to users, helping students evaluate accurate, reliable, and trustworthy information sources, discuss how libraries are evolving their collections to meet today's academic needs, and what might be on their wish list if they could create products with magic wands. So hopefully I'll live up to that expectation as we go through the presentation. As Mark mentioned, you can chat to him in the Q&A panel, and we'll field the questions probably about halfway through the hour. So to take a step back, the reason why ProQuest is interested in this space, we understand that academic research is changing, and that although books and journals are still the most prevalent content types that are used, there's a need for new resources and new ways of accessing information. And the discussion between what's going on in the field is constantly evolving. And there are a few factors that contribute to these changes, and their technology, making it easier to share information than ever before, having more places to publish, making it faster for researchers to disseminate their ideas and to have collaboration with other researchers. And in general, there's just more access to information. A lot of content that was previously only available in hard form is now available online as well. So dissertations, working papers, conference papers, all of these resources really add to the academic discussion, but of course they change the academic research landscape. So we looked at some research from Ithaca. This was conducted in 2016 and published in March of 2017. An interesting insight when responding to the question or the statement, as scholarship moves steadily away from its exclusive dependence on texts, libraries must shift their own collecting to include new material types. And so irrespective of the type of institution, most librarians agree that this was really important to move beyond text. And this is the digital transformation is something that's been going on for a number of years now, but really important for us to stay on top of it and understand what that means for how libraries are looking at their collection development and looking to work with their students and faculty. And we know that there are a plethora of resources available, as I mentioned, and it is more than the monographs and the journals these days. They're still a very important part of the discussion, but students and faculty are obviously also relying on grade literature, dissertations, reference materials, primary sources, and resources like video, especially in the classroom, to help enrich the teaching and learning experience and also to facilitate better research. So what we wanted to do was to explore the scope of the change in academic research and understand how it's affecting students, faculty, and librarians, and more importantly, understand what the challenges and opportunities that are presented by this change. And then particularly, what is our role? What's the role of a vendor in helping move through this transition? So based on some previous studies that ProQuest conducted in 2014 and 2017, we conducted a study last year on the faculty and student perspective of the impact of varied content and what that's doing to drive research, teaching, and learning. So we deployed it about a year ago in March and April of 2018, had over 1,300 faculty and student responses across tenured faculty, pre-tenured faculty, students, etc. And had a really global distribution of responses. So it gave us a really good insight into how the faculty and student experience is changing and how the role of varied content can play into that. And what we wanted to do then was to understand what does varied content mean and why is it essential to student success. And so one particular set of questions was around trying to understand what faculty thought varied content could do and how it could improve student outcomes. And 72% of faculty agreed that, of course, it would help students achieve better grades on their courses. But I think more importantly, as we move from left to right on the screen here, we see increasing agreement that it's also about producing better quality assignments and conducting more thorough literature reviews. And most importantly, probably understanding concepts and ideas more fully. Digital literacy and information literacy is so critical to helping students develop their critical thinking skills, and varied content is a great way to help facilitate that. So what we did this year is we followed up last year's study and wanted to find out if there was any striking difference between what the librarians perceive as the role of varied content and what the faculty and students had previously said in 2018. So in March of this year, just last month, we conducted a study with Library Journal with 611 librarians responding, varying in different roles across the institution, final purchasing decision rights or a decision contributor, or those that are uninvolved. They were across a range of institutions from small to very large. You'll see the distribution on the right-hand side of the screen, as well as attempting to have a global perspective, but in this case, although Library Journal's readership is international, they do mostly have a presence in North America. So we do understand that there may be some limitations to the research based on the international coverage or lack thereof. So we wanted to know, for those of you on the phone, perhaps you actually were one of the 611 librarians that participated in this study that was conducted by Library Journal. So there's a poll question up at the moment, and we're just curious to see how many of you may have been part of this study or and are here as one of the 611, or perhaps are just interested in the results. So if you can, please go ahead and answer the poll. So a bit more about the study, and again, just really trying to understand the librarian's point of view on the need for varied content types. We did look at the answers, and I'll run through the kind of key findings in a moment here. But we did divide up all the responses based on the library size, again, the purchasing decision, the number of students, whether the institution was public or private, what the job function was. And so just as if you are interested in getting a deeper look at some of this data, the white paper is now available for download, and you'll see a link there on the bottom of your screen, and we can certainly send this again afterwards. But it allows you to really dive a little bit deeper in and understand some of the nuances between the responses. So please feel free to download the white paper. But in the meantime, I will give you the brief 7 key takeaways so that you can have a high-level understanding of what the research shows. And at a first glance, I think the information being available in more formats and via more channels than ever before, that shouldn't surprise most people. I think that we would all agree that. Certainly the research says that actually some people disagree, but that's a general one to take on, and that research must go beyond the traditional journal. Thirdly, understanding that different tasks require different formats, and libraries need to think about that as they develop their collections. Fourth, students should seek a variety of viewpoints. Again, this is very consistent with what we saw in the faculty review. Number 5, students struggle to know which sources to trust. Again, this is almost a universal agreement, but interesting to see that there are some parts of the library that don't necessarily think this is true. Number 6, unifying content access simplifies administration of library resources. A majority of libraries would agree with this. And multidisciplinary and multi-format databases help users discover and use the most relevant and reliable content. So that's kind of the key summary, and now I'll walk through each of the 7 key takeaways. So the first one, information is available in more formats and via more channels than ever before. So as we see, there's a very strong agreement here. Over 88% agree that this is true. There's more formats and more channels than before. Things like primary sources especially are important news content, and it's the ability to access all those different sources in a digital way that can be sometimes overwhelming, but certainly there's a larger volume, and we know that there's an acceleration of publication rates. What is interesting is those that didn't respond. So there were a few that didn't agree with the statement, and it was mostly respondents that were not involved with purchasing decisions that gave a slight disagreement here, or small schools gave a slight disagreement. So just trying to interpret what that might mean. Perhaps those that are not having to deal with the content acquisition perhaps are not aware that there are so many more formats that are now available to the library and onward to the students and faculty. And so we have here a bit from our previous study with the faculty and students in 2018, and just trying to understand a bit about what the differences might be between what faculty use and what students use. And so faculty are predominantly using scholarly journals and secondly books, and that's certainly what they recommend in their teaching. Interestingly, students are selecting the reverse. They're predominantly using books, and actually electronic books first and foremost. Secondly, relying on scholarly journals. But in general, you'll see a pretty good correlation between the resources that are recommended by the faculty in their teaching exercises and what the students end up using. So it's a very consistent and certainly a very diverse set of resources that are being used and recommended. And so here's one of our wishes when we asked at the end of the survey what types of databases would be ideal to a library, what might design. And one of the key findings on this would be content would be highly filterable. Students are often restricted by their faculty to very specific formats. So we do know that from the previous slide that there's a predominant preference for peer-reviewed journal articles and scholarly books, while faculty themselves want everything. I think that's quite funny. They restrict what the students can use because they want to ensure that they're getting those high-quality resources, those authentic, trustworthy resources, but of course they want access to anything that might be related to their research. So an interesting kind of dichotomy there that of course needs to be balanced by librarians. So our second key finding was that research must go beyond the traditional journal. Again, not a huge surprise here. I think a more surprising maybe to me was that there were folks that disagreed with this, a small percentage, albeit, and nearly 4 out of 10 strongly agreed with this statement. And we think it might be because digital library resources have been around for so long that perhaps libraries think that the transition is already kind of towards the end, or they've already gone through the transition, or think that this is maybe an antiquated statement. So kind of a provocative one that those that disagree trying to understand what might be behind that disagreement. And we found that final decision makers actually were less likely to strongly agree, and perhaps it's because they have been responsible for the digital transformation. So for them, it's already underway. And here's just a quote from the statement that they were agreeing with. So yes, generally speaking, most libraries agree that academic research is expanding beyond the traditional journal and monograph into new formats. And of course, the library must evolve to their collections to account for this. So our third key finding was about different tasks requiring different formats. Again, probably the strongest concurrence on this one, with 63% strongly agreeing that there's a need for a matching of task and format, and overall 98% agreeing that it's true. And it's, because regardless of the subject area, we need to think about what the researcher needs and what they're doing, and whether it's a scholarly journal, book, or other material, be it multimedia, the library needs to provide those multimedia and digital formats to the user so they can answer the task at hand. And a bit more specific is, a couple other quotes here, why the library thought that it was important for to provide different resources for different tasks is, the students and faculty need to understand the pros and cons of the different content types and what to use when. Certain things are going to be more reference material, certain items might be more cutting edge research, some might be systematic reviews. It's really important to understand how valid the information is and when it can be of use. Another quote from this part of the survey was, that different formats and content types are more appropriate than others depending on what the research is trying to achieve and at what stage of the research cycle they are at. And if you think about the research cycle in a generalized way, you start with thinking and planning, having an idea, then you're working on a discovery, coming up with something new that extends the field you're working in, and you gather and analyze evidence that will help validate that discovery. You're writing and publishing, and then sharing and disseminating your work, and then hopefully collaborating and going through that cycle again in the next way after getting feedback from your research peers. That at every stage of the way, you're going to need different resources. And if you think about it from a pedagogical standpoint and look at something like Bloom's taxonomy, you understand that for students, they're starting with kind of a general awareness of the information that's available, and they're moving all the way up the hierarchy to hopefully creating something new. But when they're first starting out, they do need sort of more introductory material, something that's going to give them an orientation of the field, and that's where resources like book chapters and videos can be really helpful in orienting. And then as you go through, you're looking at things like primary sources and journal articles, moving all the way to the kind of the limits of the field, looking at things like theses and dissertations and understanding what the tomorrow's scholars are looking at as they're pushing the field forward. So lots of different opportunities to suggest different materials for different stages of the research process, be it for a student or for a faculty member. And that takes us on to the next point, which is around seeking a variety of viewpoints. Again, a strong alignment here, 94% of academic librarians agreeing, and with more than half of them strongly agreeing that students should seek a variety of viewpoints. And this is mostly around building critical thinking skills. It's really important, said one librarian, for students to seek a variety of viewpoints, often published in different formats, so they can draw their own conclusions and build those critical thinking skills. They understand that it's going to take different views and and they're going to bring about different insights so that they can come up with their own opinion. And I think that that was really the key point with the viewpoints is you need to look broadly so that you can develop in a strong argument yourself. So a very interesting insight from this one. So our 5th out of 7, students struggling to know which sources to trust. Again, I think I was surprised to see that there was 1% that disagreed with this statement, not strongly, but they did disagree. The majority of people, almost all of the individuals that the 611 librarians agreed with this, that students, they struggle to understand what's a valid resource, what's citable. And I know from some of my own work with students and trying to understand the struggles they face, particularly with citations and understanding what's gonna work in their reference section, in their bibliography. There's a real fear, and particularly when it comes to new content types, there's a kind of a fear that although they may use a particular source, like a video, when they're prepping their research papers or the research projects, they don't feel comfortable citing them. So I think that there's both a fear on the student side about what's trustworthy and what's going to be considered authoritative by their faculty member. But then on the kind of the librarian perspective, when we dug into the statistics a bit more, it was actually the variation came in the roles of the library. So it was 4% of administrators versus 0% of librarians that worked directly with students, and 1% that provided library support didn't think that students had a problem. So there's a slight higher proportion of administrators that thought that this problem didn't exist, when the clear majority of the library that particularly works with students understands that this is something that students struggle with. And again, trying to understand a bit more about why, we went back to the faculty and student survey and tried to understand, what the faculty were thinking, and, why were these skills so critical. And this one in particular stuck out, which was, this is necessary to become better citizens. That's why varied content is necessary. In this era where fake news spreads on old and new media alike, the skill is so vital to our democracy. And I've just found this to be a really kind of a powerful statement to understanding, why information literacy is so critical and why having a variety of viewpoints from a variety of content sources is so essential. It's really about shaping minds and helping them understand how to critically evaluate what they're reading so that they can have an active contribution in society. So 6th up, we're nearing the home stretch now, is unifying content access simplifies administration of library resources. This is where we start to see a kind of a more of an uncertain or a proportion, 24% neither agreeing or disagreeing. So not necessarily a strong consensus here. We do have 2/3 thinking that unifying content access simplifies administration, but certainly that leaves quite a bit of uncertainty and even some disagreement. And it was interesting because it was these smaller institutions that tended to favor having the content on a single platform. And so as student size, the number of students at an institution goes down, the desire to have a unified access point goes up. They're sort of inversely proportionate. And it might just be because smaller institutions have less resources, they have less specialization, and so having the resources collected in one place certainly reduces a lot of that burden. Interesting ways to start to interpret that data. And another wish that we got in the kind of free-form text at the end of the survey about what the ideal database might look like. Well, it would include books, ebooks, periodicals, and streaming media, but each type of information would be clearly identified. It would also be possible to easily filter content to a specific format so the students aren't overwhelmed with 999,000 results from their initial search, said a library dean. And this was not an uncommon kind of thought. There was a lot of requests for content to be filterable as opposed to having to flick through page after page of results. very well labeled, what the content types were. That was another frequent request. And just, the ability to just keep a relevant number of results. In some other research that we've done within ProQuest, we looked at what the sweet spot was for the number of search results, and when did the student or researcher feel that their search strategy was strong. And it was, I think, around 200 results or 175 results, and they felt like if their search structure, be it a keyword plus a couple of filters or whatever, if they got back about 200 results, they felt like that was probably a good number. And I always thought that was quite interesting, that there is that kind of feel-good result list, that it's not too broad and it's not too small. I'm not necessarily missing anything. This is a good number to start working with, so it's almost the Goldilocks. So we think about that a lot as obviously as a way of interpreting this research when we start to design our products. And so the last key finding from the research is that the multidisciplinary, multi-format databases help users discover and use the most relevant and reliable content. So again, this one, we start to see that kind of middle third, that 30%, 29%, that's neither agreeing nor disagreeing. Not a lot of consensus here, but 2/3 still thinking that it's helpful, and certainly still some uncertainty. So it's really just trying to understand, what multidisciplinary, multi-format databases might do, and why, 2/3 of respondents would agree that they're reliable and relevant. And another wish that we saw was that, I'd like to talk about the functionality. I wish the multidisciplinary database would offer the best of the discipline-specific ones, really good ways to narrow down topics when getting back so many results. So again, about that kind of taking the best of the discipline-specific ones, getting that great vocabulary, that great functionality, but having a bit more flexibility to cross between different disciplines. And thinking more about that, I started to try to figure out why we might interpret the benefits of a multidisciplinary database. We know that separately in the survey there was a question about discipline specific, and the results were quite similar, maybe a little bit more positive, but again about 2/3 saying that they wanted a discipline specific database that was multi-format. But I thought, what would be the real value of the multidisciplinary database, and why might that be still so important for libraries? And I thought about how many global challenges require coordination across a variety of fields, and they call on disciplinary specialists as well as interdisciplinarians. So when we think about wicked problems that are being faced by countries all across the world, we understand that it's not going to be a single faculty or even a single institution or country that's going to help solve those global challenges. And so we need to be able to coordinate a faculty member in our chemistry department with a faculty member in a business school across the street or across the world. And they need to be coordinated by interdisciplinarians so that they can begin to really look critically across a variety of disciplinary lenses. And so a good example of this, I think everyone's probably seen this wonderful picture so far, but I hope you've also had a chance to watch her TED Talk. Katie Bauman said, big projects like the Event Horizon Telescope are successful due to all the interdisciplinary expertise different people bring to the table. We're a melting pot of astronomers, physicists, mathematicians, and engineers, and that this is what will make it soon possible to achieve something once thought impossible. This was back in November 2016, and obviously last week we saw the first photograph of the black hole. Just such an amazing feat, and she was very, very modest to say, this was not just my accomplishment. We've been working with researchers all across the world together, across all disciplines, to create something really, really special. And if we look at how ProQuest is responding to that need for multidisciplinary research, just want to walk through a couple more examples of the types of resources that we can bring together that help to address that need for multidisciplinary research. So we recently launched a product called ProQuest One Academic back in January, and what we're doing is bringing together 4 of the largest multidisciplinary collections in the world into the single largest collection called ProQuest One Academic. It brings together our resources of ProQuest Central, Academic Complete, ProQuest Dissertations and Theses Global, and Academic Video Online. And it looks across all of the disciplines that we cover, and again brings together for the first time all of those formats. And we think this is really critical because it allows a jumping off point for researchers that are trying to pull together a multidisciplinary challenge with interdisciplinarians and disciplinary specialists. So another example beyond the black hole photograph would be the population aging. We know around the world that everyone is facing demographic shifts, be that the median age of the regional population increasing, or in some cases actually decreasing, due to rising life expectancy and changes in fertility rates. And so actually in the developed countries, we are also at sub-replacement fertility levels, so less than 2.1 children per woman, and that means that with people living longer and having less children, there's a balance in the workforce and consumer spending patterns. So how are we going to address something as complex and interwoven as population aging? And it's no one faculty or one institution's responsibility to take on the challenge and opportunity that comes with changing demographic shifts. And it's going to take researchers in public health, education, economics, political science, ecology, urban planning, etc., to come together with solutions that will help us balance the changes in our demography and to continue to thrive as a society going forward. I have two more examples. The second one would be sustainable fashion. This is one of particular interest to myself. I've done some research on this, and I just find it very interesting that in a time where there's such rampant consumer demand and social media does a great job of creating demand, that there's been a bit of a backlash. And so, we're buying more than we know what to do with. Landfills are filling up. There's a lot of environmental degradation that goes along with creating clothes and getting rid of clothes. And so there's a lot of opportunities to find new ways to meet consumer demand in a more sustainable way. And so things like business, technology, social welfare, environmental impacts come together. There's a lot of implications from government regulation and public health and women's studies that also need to be considered. So it's really about thinking about these kind of global challenges and all of the different key stakeholders and players that will be part of the solution, but certainly need to look together. And if you are overlooking a particular aspect or a particular discipline, there's a chance that your solution won't be as robust. And the last one would be food security, probably one of the most fundamental things that we can think about, when it comes to providing an adequate amount of food at an affordable way to our population. This is probably our most basic concern. But there's obviously a lot of economic and political instability around the world, weather-related changes, delivery interruptions that can make it very difficult to have an efficient food system. And so, again, pulling together specialists from agriculture, political science, manufacturing, education, economics, tying them together with some interdisciplinarians, you can start to find solutions. And these are the kind of projects that we see a lot of, particularly undergraduate students being tasked to work on in group projects, in research projects. They're being asked to build the skills to solve something that doesn't have a straightforward answer. There is no one way to tackle these problems. And so by doing multidisciplinary research, they really are building the skills they need to move into the workforce or to stay in academia and to be able to connect something that's really quite challenging and complex. So very, very important work, and very, very important. This is kind of how those results could look for a food sustainability query. And it's really just about trying to provide a platform and a content set that will allow for this really important multidisciplinary research by providing access to all the different formats that are so critical to both the teaching, learning, and research space. So just one last look at those key takeaways from our librarian study on the role and need of varied content types, and then after this, we can open up for questions. Again, we know information is available in more formats and channels than before, and that research is going, not necessarily must go, but it is going beyond the traditional journal, and that this is because different tasks require different formats. Faculty are really pressing students to look for a variety of viewpoints, and the students are coming back with some challenges in understanding what's trustworthy. And so hopefully by unifying content access, we'll be able to simplify administration for library resources and hopefully be able to provide something that really addresses the needs of all of the different students and faculty. So with that, I would like to say thank you for listening and open up the floor for any questions.
Thank you, Brie. That was fantastic. That was so great. So we don't have any pre-submitted questions right now, but if anybody wants to submit a question, I'm looking at the Q&A in the chat, so we would be happy to take questions, or you can unmute yourself and identify who you are, and please feel free to ask a question. Mark, did you have any questions on your end? Just curious.
We just had a request come through here.
Yep.
That, let's see, a request from...
They're all rolling in now.
They're starting to roll in now, all right.
Yeah. All right, so
sometimes
I'll just
takes
start
a minute.
to fire them off here. Question number 1, is the ProQuest 1 a separate product or just a combination of our existing products in a combined search?
So ProQuest 1 Academic is a what we might call a meta product. So it is a combination of those 4 multidisciplinary collections. What's quite unique now is that they're all available on the ProQuest platform for cross-searchability. Previously, our ebook content was only available on eBook Central, and our Alexander Street platform was the only place to watch the Avon videos. You can now also work with your ebooks and Avon videos on the ProQuest platform. So ProQuest 1 Academic is our multidisciplinary product, but certainly if you have any combination of our products, be them books, journals, video, etc., they're all cross-searchable within the ProQuest platform.
Okay, second question. Can you break down your student participants, all undergraduate level, graduate level, or both?
I'm just going to return to that slide. I don't have the number off the top of my head. Let me just see if it's in the slide itself. If not, it will certainly be, yes, it's just as 188 students here. I don't have the number offhand, but I can certainly go back into the research and check, or you're also obviously welcome to download this white paper, unless Mark Ailing knows the answer off the top of his head.
Or how about we give Mark a moment to look that up and we move on to the next question? Okay. The next question is, I've been trying to figure out how this product works with discovery systems. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. We find that the ProQuest 1 Academic product is really a collection of content. And if you, it has over 650 million items in it. Again, it's the largest that we've come across in the market. And if you have a discovery solution, it works really well because it provides a very consistent user experience every time a user is going from discovery out to the content source, be it a video, a book, or a journal article, etc. They're having a kind of a consistent experience with the interaction with the platform, and they're also being exposed to lateral search results. We're able to render related materials on the side of the page that will send them in a kind of a sideways direction to see if there's something that we can suggest, and then they can certainly go back out to the discovery solution to look beyond ProQuest resources, look across the entire library suite. So that's really kind of one of the key distinctions. Obviously, discovery is really about providing a single access point for all of the library's resources. What we're trying to do with ProQuest 1 Academic is provide a collection within the ProQuest platform experience that makes a very consistent user experience and hopefully streamlines a lot of the administrative burden of licensing multiple content types.
Okay, the next question I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, and it's in regards to databases that provide various and often adversarial or opposing viewpoints, such as supporting freshman research writing courses, for example. Is there a ProQuest recommended resource that you believe is a good fit for that?
Sorry, Katie, can you start the question over? I just want to make sure I answered appropriately.
Yeah, so the individual is asking about a Gale database and indicating that the database provides various positions, often adversarial.
Yes, okay. Yeah, so we don't have a specific kind of viewpoint database, kind of a pro-con database. I think that's for the typical research topics of support or go against climate change, or what is the debate, basically any of the kind of current events debates. But a lot of that information is available in our early learning products. So we'd be happy to chat offline and put you in touch with our product manager who manages those products to see if there'd be something that'd be a better fit. But we don't have a single product that does that. It's kind of rolled up into a larger product that we have.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad you understood the paraphrasing.
I hope I did. If not, I'm sure.
You nailed it, yeah. Are there any new functionality with ProQuest One Academic that is not in the ProQuest platform? So what did the platform get as far as enhancements when we turned on the product?
Right. So I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that ProQuest One Academic is the content package or the content collection that resides on the ProQuest platform. And certainly there's a critical mass in it that you get by being able to cross-search those 650 million results. But if you have any of the resources, any combination of formats, I should say, on the ProQuest platform, be it some video and some newspapers and some journal articles and some books, which were already existing in a few of our other collections, you will certainly still have that cross-searchability. So this is just kind of intensifying the volume that is cross-searchable to provide access to the most number of disciplines and most formats in a single collection.
Okay, in the research you talked about, did you find that in general where the librarians were not on the ground working with students and those who were consistently disagreeing when it comes to student behavior?
I don't want to generalize that much, but there definitely was a distinction. And again, I really encourage you to dig into the numbers yourself. There is a bit of a disconnect, and sometimes it's hard to interpret why. There was a difference in the administrator's perspective. I think most often it was really more about the differences were with collection development and who had a role in the purchase decision. For those that were uninvolved, there seemed to be less awareness about this kind of information overload. About student behavior, I think there was a slight disconnect, but again, I think that's certainly an area that's ripe for more research on our behalf, because there was a few outliers. I think generally there was strong alignment, but would be very curious to understand why there could be any disagreement when 99, it's sort of that, 3 out of 4 dentists agree, and it's sort of like, what happened to the 4th dentist? I do wonder what was that kind of 1 out of 100, and it's probably nothing, statistically significant, but certainly curious and raises an eyebrow.
Excellent. So Mark is one of our product marketing managers here at ProQuest, and he has diligently found the answer to the faculty breakdown. And so, Mark, if you unmute yourself, take the ball.
So can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yes.
Good. So we had 1,355 responses, of which just over 200 were students, 136 were postgrad, and 66 were undergrads.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
Okay. Extraordinary.
Yeah, you are the greatest fact. All right, so a couple more questions, and then I think that wraps up the Q&A. I often find results in ProQuest Central that aren't reflected in Summon when searching by controlled vocabulary. Does Summon use all of the metadata available in ProQuest Central?
There is, I'm trying to think how to answer this quickly. We are working on alignment between, obviously there are different kind of backbones between Summon and between the ProQuest platform, but there is an effort underway to align those. So certainly would actually love to talk to that individual offline and put you in touch with some of our colleagues to give you an insight. It's not a part of the product development that I work very closely with, but I certainly can put you in touch with folks on that work with our taxonomies and our indexing.
Okay. Just maybe another moment here for any additional questions to come through the queue here. I'm taking Oh, we got a question. So are there any portions of the ProQuest One academic items that would not appear in a Google search, not behind a paywall?
That's actually sort of two questions. So we do actively work with Google Scholar to make sure that the content on the ProQuest platform is indexed by Google Scholar, because we do recognize that as a reliable source for a lot of, as a reliable starting point for many students. So we have worked to make sure that they're discoverable there. Of course, then there is a paywall when it comes to accessing the ProQuest platform that is within the restrictions of the institutional IP. So that would still require the student or faculty member to log in.
Okay, and so here we have another question related to discovery. How is relevancy ranking determined? Is non-ProQuest content included? And I believe the context of the question is non-ProQuest content included within ProQuest One Academic.
It might be related to discovery, and so I think I can answer that on behalf of my Ex Libris colleagues that work on Summon and Primo. I can tell you, whether I'd like it or not, there's absolutely no preference made towards ProQuest content. They're absolutely agnostic and vehemently so. They make sure that it is based on the underlying content itself and not the source or database from which it comes. So there's no preference to ProQuest content within Summon or Primo. I can't speak for any other discovery solutions.
Another question, will ProQuest products be full text discoverable by Primo? Lots of discovery questions this afternoon.
Yeah, will they be? So that is maybe one kind of key distinction, is that when you're searching the ProQuest platform directly, you are searching across all of the full text. And as it stands, if you're searching from a discovery solution, you are searching the citation information and the abstract and citation information. So there is another level of discoverability, you could say, with the full text searching within ProQuest platform.
I am all out of questions here, Brie, and unless we get another question here in the last minute or so, I think that might conclude our Q&A session.
Looks like I'm seeing one that may have been missed. Let me just read it really quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, I will. I'm hesitant to read it because I don't quite understand it. So it says, how are archives and other primary source repositories considered in the statistics of the most used research formats for faculty and students? And how does ProQuest view archives as part of the pedagogical approach to conducting library research? Whew, that's a very large question. So how are they considered in the statistics of the most used research format? Let me just run back to that top 10 list and see if that helps to start to answer the question, because I do believe we have some historical books in here, and some other primary sources would be, I think we've got some historical news as well. In this research as well, that we go beyond the top 10. This is just a summary here. So if you were interested in understanding more about archival research and primary source repositories, I can certainly show you where that is reflected in the list. But interestingly enough, they're not necessarily here generally in the top 10, apart from maybe what faculty might recommend. And as part of the pedagogical approach, I don't know, I think ProQuest is obviously very strong in its collection of primary research, primary source research sources. I think it really does vary. For a higher level undergrad, I think that they're often used in the classroom as a way to start to understand how to further a career in research. For even lower level undergraduate programs, we understand that they are also a great way for students to start to understand the variation in opinion over time. So we do believe that they are valuable in the teaching and learning experience, but probably when it comes to use, the predominant use will come from faculty and postgraduate researchers.
Thank you.
And Mark has kindly let me know that there is much more about primary sources in the 2018 survey, so highly recommend you download that one as well.
Sure. Any other questions for those participants still on the line? We have about 169 attendees that I can see. No, great.
They're starting to
Yeah.
go. So as you're dropping off, I just want to say again, thank you very much for joining, and do follow up with me personally if you have any questions, or any of my colleagues.
All right, take care, everyone, and you'll be receiving this presentation as well as maybe the 2018 faculty and student presentations because there's so much interest in that content as well in an email from ProQuest following up this webinar today. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Brie, and thank you, Katie. I would just also remind folks that we will send out a follow-up email likely early tomorrow morning with a link to the recording for this program. So everybody who registered should be able to see it. And if you do have a quick moment to fill out our brief 5-question survey on this webinar and sort of on all of our webinars, we would really appreciate it if you would take a moment to do that. You should see that link available to you right in the chat box. All right. So thank you once again, everyone out there. We appreciate your time today, and thank you, Brie and Katie and Mark, for all of your effort.
Thanks, Mark.
Take care, everyone.